When rent was due, the neighborhood threw a party to keep the lights on. Harlem kitchens became jazz clubs, parlor rugs turned into dance floors, and pennies piled into landlords' hands. How did ordinary families turn fun into survival? Here are 25 forgotten rent party fixes from the 1930s. 25. Nickel door charge kept the landlord away. At the front door, a nickel or dime was all it took to get inside. 5 cents doesn't sound like much, but when 30 or 40 people showed up, that was $1.50 to $2, enough to cover a good part of rent in the 1930s. For families desperate to keep a roof overhead, this little door fee was more than music money. It was survival itself. And when the jar filled up, the next trick appeared naturally. 24. Local neighbor bands played for food or tips. No nightclub contracts, no stage needed. Just a neighbor with a trumpet or a cousin who could play piano. Many bands didn't ask for pay. A plate of stew or a few coins was enough. The music filled tiny living rooms, keeping energy high long into the night. Guests danced, neighbors laughed, and every extra hour kept nickels flowing. Music wasn't just entertainment, it was rent insurance with rhythm. And when stomachs growled, another solution kept things going. 23rd. Potluck suppers filled bellies while raising cash. Nobody expected the host to feed a whole crowd. Every guest brought something: beans, cornbread, maybe a pie. The tables filled with dishes, and food costs never crushed the family holding the party. A potluck kept the crowd happy and generous, making the hat pass later on even more successful. Full bellies meant open wallets, and laughter around the table kept spirits from sinking. The kitchen was as important as the music. Then came the midnight tradition, quiet but powerful. 22. Hat pass collections added to the pot quietly. Around midnight, someone casually passed a hat or basket. Guests dropped in nickels, dimes, or quarters if they had them. No one was pressured, but the pile always grew fast. By the end of the night, the hat could hold enough to cover rent and groceries together. It was quiet, discreet, and deeply effective. Neighbors saving neighbors in the simplest way. Coins clinked softly, but the relief was loud. Of course, hosts had to be careful. Landlords couldn't know. 21. Discreet handwritten invites avoided landlord suspicion. Invitations were never printed flyers or public announcements. They were handwritten notes, slipped to trusted friends, or whispered about in passing. Landlords and police were often quick to crack down if they suspected a rent party. But quiet invitations meant the event stayed neighborly and private, not commercial. Everyone knew the code. Don't bring strangers. Don't make noise outside. A simple scrap of paper could mean the difference between paying rent or facing eviction, and families shared the load. 20. Rotating hosts shared the burden across households. Hosting every week would have crushed one family, so rent parties rotated from home to home. One Saturday, it might be at the Johnsons'. Next week at the Smiths'. This spread the costs, the work, and even the risk of landlord suspicion. It also made sure no single household burned out while others just enjoyed it. Sharing the role kept the tradition alive for years in tight neighborhoods. Everyone benefited and everyone contributed. Then came another source, liquid and profitable. 19. Home-brewed drinks boosted funds. Not every party sold drinks, but when they did, homemade beer or gin was a sure hit. A jar of gin could sell for 25 cents a pour, turning a kitchen into a hidden speakeasy. During Prohibition, this was risky. but neighbors often trusted each other enough to keep it quiet. Selling a few jars could double the rent money by night's end. Alcohol was both entertainment and survival cash. When the music played, another space opened. 18. Furniture pushed to the walls made dance floors, chairs, tables, and even beds were shoved against the walls, creating open space in tiny apartments. A living room barely big enough for 4 people suddenly held 20 dancers. Dance floors turned cramped flats into clubs for one night. Guests stomped to jazz, blues, or ragtime, shaking the house but raising spirits high. More people meant more nickels for rent. Energy fueled generosity, but it also meant little ones needed to disappear. The next fix managed that. 17. Kids sent to bed early kept the house adults only. Children weren't part of the party scene. By dusk, kids were tucked away in bedrooms with lullabies or simple warnings to stay quiet. Adults needed space for music, food, and sometimes liquor. This separation also made guests feel freer to drop coins in the jar, knowing the night was for grown-ups only. Families balanced survival with parenting in creative ways. Once the kids were quiet, the sound system, cheap and clever, took over. The transition was simple and loud. 16. Word-of-mouth DJs spun borrowed records. Record players weren't cheap, but almost every block had 1 or 2. A neighbor might lend a phonograph, and someone became the DJ of the night, flipping borrowed records, spinning blues or swing tunes. No speakers, just crank handles and needles scratching away, filling the room with rhythm. Guests sometimes tipped the person in charge of the music. Entertainment costs were nearly zero, but the mood was priceless. When midnight rolled in, another clever money trick kept rolling. 15. Midnight raffles drew extra nickels. A cake, quilt, or even a basket of fruit was enough to spark excitement. Guests bought raffle tickets for a nickel, dreaming of walking home with something sweet or useful. Raffles raised money without anyone feeling pressured. It was fun disguised as fundraising. Sometimes the prize winner would even donate their prize back to be raffled again. The same item could earn twice its worth in tickets. Beyond games, even how people have changed. Quietly, but effectively. 14. Guests slipped donations under plates or cups. Pride mattered, even in poverty. Some didn't want others to see how little they gave, so coins were quietly slid under plates or tucked in cups. Hosts collected them later, finding nickels and dimes like treasures hidden in plain sight. No one felt embarrassed, but everyone contributed. It proved dignity and survival could coexist. Alongside the coins, sweets often pulled double duty as both dessert and fundraiser. That's where another tasty trick appeared next. 13. Passing around homemade pies for a few cents a slice. Pie wasn't just dessert, it was a strategy. A host's homemade apple pie, cut into 8 slices, could turn into 8 nickels, nearly doubling the cost of flour and sugar that went into baking it. Sometimes neighbors donated pies too, knowing every slice sold helped the rent jar. Desserts were more than food. They were community savings plans baked with love. As crowds grew, though, another problem appeared: where to seat everyone. That's where creativity stepped in. 12. Rented chairs turned cramped flats into proper halls. Apartment rooms could only hold so many. So, for a small investment, often just a dime or two per chair, hosts rented folding chairs. A cramped flat became a hall where more bodies meant more coins. The rental paid for itself quickly, and bigger gatherings made for bigger rent funds. Hosting wasn't only about money, It was about making neighbors comfortable enough to stay longer and spend more. And when nights stretched late, safety became a shared duty. 11. Neighbors walked each other home safe at night. After midnight, city streets could be dark and unsafe. Guests didn't just party, they protected each other. Groups left together, walking friends back home so no one faced danger alone. It was practical safety, but also proof of the community bonds rent parties built. Everyone looked after each other because survival wasn't just about paying bills, it was about staying alive. Even generosity adapted, making sure no one felt excluded. The answer came in food and fairness. 10. Pay what you can plates respected broke neighbors. Not every guest could spare a nickel, but no one was turned away hungry. Some paid pennies, others nothing, yet everyone still got a plate of beans or stew. These flexible, pay-what-you-can meals built loyalty. Next week, the same neighbors might come with a dime to help. It wasn't charity, it was trust, and it kept crowds coming back. Meanwhile, music kept people entertained and generous in new ways. Coins stacked somewhere else entirely next. 9. Passing the piano bench for tips. If someone could play jazz or gospel, the piano bench became a fundraising seat. Coins stacked on the lid. As songs rolled out, live entertainment without hiring a band. A skilled player could earn the host several dimes an hour, keeping spirits high and wallets open. Guests didn't just pay for music, they paid for joy. This sense of surprise kept parties fresh. And sometimes the surprises were much bigger when certain visitors showed up. Excitement rose higher still. 8. Surprise guests, touring musicians dropping by Harlem's rent parties, became legendary partly because real stars sometimes appeared. Musicians like Fats Waller or Duke Ellington might drop into neighborhood flats, playing a set for food, drink, or just the vibe. Crowds swelled instantly, and collections spiked. These nights blurred the line between local survival and cultural history, turning private apartments into stages for giants. Word of these parties spread far, but they weren't just about glamour. They were also about accountability. Records were kept carefully. 7. Rent books showed everyone exactly what was covered. Hosts kept little notebooks where every coin collected was recorded. Guests could see the tally rising, proof that their contributions mattered, and nothing was pocketed unfairly. Transparency built trust in neighborhoods where suspicion was natural, and it kept the rent parties respected as serious survival tools, not just fun nights. Each entry was accountable and made visible. But survival needed more than trust. It also needed light, especially when utilities weren't guaranteed. Candles and kerosene filled the gap. 6. Borrowed lamps kept the party lit. Electricity could be cut for unpaid bills, but neighbors had workarounds. Friends brought kerosene lamps, candles, or extra bulbs, so the party could go on. Light wasn't just practical. It meant safety, atmosphere, and longer hours for collecting coins. Some households even borrowed lanterns from churches or workplaces. These glowing symbols turned nights of worry into nights of warmth. Decorations, too, helped transform small flats into places where people forgot their troubles for a while. Next came color. 5. Homemade decorations dressed up plain flats, streamers, crepe paper, and scraps of cloth transformed bare apartments into festive halls. It cost almost nothing, just imagination and neighborly effort. Even in Harlem tenements, parties looked lively with a few hand-cut banners and paper chains. Decoration mattered. It created a sense of occasion that justified the dime at the door. Guests felt they weren't just giving charity, but paying for a real night out. Crowds grew bigger when different social groups came together. More guests meant more. 4. Guest lists mixed work friends and church friends. Hosts invited co-workers, church members, and neighborhood pals, creating a blend that swelled attendance and doubled the coin jar. When factory paychecks were thin, a pastor's circle might carry the night. These overlapping networks proved vital. One community's surplus covered another's shortfall. Rent parties weren't cliques. They were cross-sections of working-class life. More guests meant more meals to serve, and food became its own income stream. Kitchens opened, and hot plates turned into survival fundraising. Hungry guests wanted more. 3. Open kitchens served up hot plates for sale. Stew, beans, or fried fish sold for pennies. A bowl brought in steady income alongside music and dancing. For many families, food sales equaled or even exceeded door charges, covering coal, rent, and groceries in one night. Cooking in bulk stretched costs further. One ham hock flavored an entire pot. The kitchen doubled as a fundraiser and community kitchen, feeding dozens who couldn't afford restaurants. Once the pots were empty, neighbors still had one task left. Cleaning up mattered because 2. Everyone pitched in for cleanup the next morning. By sunrise, guests became helpers, scrubbing floors, putting furniture back, and hauling trash. It wasn't just courtesy, it was solidarity. Rent parties built community by blending fun with survival, and cleanup kept goodwill alive. No one wanted hosts punished for late work shifts or messy homes. Neighbors worked quickly, sometimes before landlords dropped by. The cycle of effort and relief always pointed to the same goal. Rent must be paid, or lights went out. That final payoff meant 1. Rent paid in time meant lights stayed on and families stayed housed. Every nickel, dime, and secret donation added up. For tenants facing eviction, that little pile of coins bought security for another month. In the 1930s, Harlem and beyond, rent parties were survival wrapped in laughter, jazz, and shared struggle. They weren't charity. They were ingenious self-help systems, blending culture with economics. Families stayed in their homes, landlords got their money, and communities discovered power in pooling small efforts. The lights stayed on, and dignity stayed intact. Hardship sparked hidden resilience everywhere. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into forgotten rent party fixes, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's plenty more history where money, survival, and community collide, so stay tuned for the next story. See you in the next video.